Snow and dust blew together in the cold wind, biting at Ethan's face as he carried a bag of scrap metal home from the repair yard. The colony lights flickered above the narrow street, and most shops had already closed. His boots crunched over frozen ground when a faint sound made him stop. It was soft, shaky, like a whimper. He turned his head toward the dark space between two storage buildings. At first, he saw only shadows. Then his eyes caught movement, small shapes huddled together. Trembling, he stepped closer. Two alien girls sat on the ground, knees pulled to their chests, thin arms wrapped tightly around themselves. Their skin was pale blue, covered in dirt and scratches, and their clothes were torn almost to rags. The older one had sharp, bright eyes that followed his every step. The smaller one's eyes were half shut, her lips bluish from cold. They didn't speak when he crouched down. He opened his bag and pulled out the bread roll he'd been saving for dinner. Slowly, he held it out. The older girl glanced at her sister, then at him, suspicion and hunger fighting in her face. She took the bread, broke it in half, and gave the bigger piece to the smaller one. They ate like they hadn't tasted food in days, chewing fast but careful, as if scared someone might snatch it away. Ethan looked around. No one else was on the street. No one cared. He set the bag of scrap aside and pulled off his thick coat. The older girl tensed when he placed it over their shoulders, but the younger one leaned into its warmth with a faint sigh. "My home is close," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure they understood him. "You'll freeze out here." The older girl hesitated, eyes darting to the street. Then, as if making a choice she didn't like, she nodded. Ethan stood and offered a hand. She didn't take it, but she rose, keeping her sister close, and followed him. They walked in silence. The wind howled between buildings, pushing icy dust into their faces. When they reached his small workshop home, he unlocked the door and waved them in. The room was cramped but warmer than outside, with a faint smell of oil and metal. He set the scrap bag aside, then grabbed the small pot from the counter. A few minutes later, broth bubbled on the stove. The smell filled the air, and he noticed the older girl's shoulders loosen slightly. He found two old blankets and placed them on the worn couch. The girls sat together, still wrapped in his coat. The younger one's head rested on her sister's lap, eyes closing in exhaustion. When the broth was ready, he poured it into two bowls and placed them on the low table. Steam curled upward. The older girl's hand shook as she picked up the spoon. She blew on the broth, then fed the first spoonful to her sister. Only after the younger one had several mouthfuls did she take a bite herself. "You have names?" he asked. The older girl glanced at him, hesitating. "Lyra," she said finally. Her voice was hoarse. She touched the smaller one's hair. "Sami." He nodded. "Ethan." They didn't talk after that. He let them eat in peace. Outside, the wind grew louder, rattling the metal roof. Inside, the small heater hummed, pushing away the cold. After they finished, Ethan took the empty bowls to the counter. He returned to find Sami asleep and Lyra watching him, her eyes sharper now, studying him like she was trying to understand why he'd helped them. He noticed a small mark behind her ear, partly hidden by tangled hair, a faint silver symbol, almost like a crest. Before he could ask, she pulled the blanket higher to cover it. "You can stay here tonight," he said, adjusting the heater's dial. "Door's locked. No one will bother you." Lyra gave a small nod, but her gaze stayed fixed on him, cautious yet not ungrateful. He moved to his workbench to fix a broken circuit board, pretending not to notice when she slowly leaned back, letting herself rest. Soon her breathing matched her sister's, slow, deep, tired beyond fear. The night outside was harsh and endless, but inside for now there was warmth. Ethan didn't know who they were or why they were alone, but a thought crossed his mind as he looked at them. Whatever trouble they carried, it had already left shadows in their eyes. Somewhere in the storm's howl, it felt like those shadows had followed them here. Morning light slipped weakly through the dirty window, casting a pale glow across the workshop. Ethan poured hot water into a dented kettle, the hiss of steam filling the air. Lyra was awake, sitting on the couch with her sister still curled beside her under the blankets. She watched him quietly, her sharp eyes taking in every move. He placed a plate of flatbread and a jar of sweet paste on the table. Lyra hesitated, then woke Sami with a gentle shake. The younger girl rubbed her eyes and smiled faintly at the sight of food. They ate slowly, savoring every bite. When they finished, Ethan said, I need to go to the market. You can come or stay here. Lyra's answer was quick. We'll come. The streets were busier than the night before. Merchants shouted over each other, trying to draw customers to their stalls. The air was filled with the smell of cooked meat, oil, and sharp spices. Lyra kept Sami close, but her hand always gripping her sister's wrist. They stopped at a stall selling fresh bread. Ethan handed a few credits to the vendor, but the man's gaze shifted to the girls. His expression changed, tight, wary. He gave Ethan the bread, but leaned forward. You don't want trouble, human, the vendor muttered under his breath. Send them away before they bring it to your door. Ethan frowned. What kind of trouble? The vendor glanced around, lowering his voice even more. They're marked. You see the symbol? That's not for commoners. That's blood you don't mix with, unless you want hunters on your trail. Before Ethan could ask more, Lyra tugged at his arm. We should go, she said, her tone hard. They moved through the market quickly after that. Every so often, Ethan caught strangers looking at them a little too long. Whispers followed in their wake. By the time they reached the last row of stalls, even Sami seemed tense, like clinging to her sister's arm. On the way back, Ethan tried again. What's this symbol they're talking about? Lyra shook her head. It's nothing. It's not nothing if people are afraid of it. Her voice dropped, but her eyes stayed on the street. It's safer for you not to know. Back at the workshop, the wind was picking up again, carrying fine dust that scraped against the metal walls. Ethan locked the door and set the bread on the table. The girls sat, eating quietly. A sudden knock broke the stillness. Ethan opened the door a crack, but no one was there. Only a folded piece of paper lay on the ground. He picked it up. The writing was in a language he couldn't read, but the paper smelled faintly of oil and smoke. Lyra saw it and stiffened. Burn it, she said quickly. Why? Her gaze hardened. Because if you don't, they'll come faster. That night, Ethan lay on his cot but couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the walls. Every shadow outside the window felt like it was watching. He could hear the girls breathing on the couch, and every now and then Lyra would shift restlessly. Sometime deep into the night, a soft thud echoed from the back of the workshop. Ethan rose quietly, grabbing the wrench from his workbench. He moved toward the sound, but when he reached the door leading outside, it was already swinging open in the wind. He stepped out into the cold. The alley was empty until he noticed faint footprints in the dust leading away from the workshop. 2 sets. Small, his heart pounded as he followed them. They trailed through the alley, past empty crates and old machinery, and ended near the edge of the colony's landing yard. A dark patch in the sky caught his eye. A ship, small and black, was lifting off without lights, vanishing quickly into the clouds. When he returned, the couch was empty. Only the blankets lay crumpled on the floor. On the table beside the untouched bread was a small wooden charm shaped like a star. He picked it up, the wood warm from recent touch. The wind outside howled louder, but inside the workshop, the silence pressed heavier than the cold. Years slipped by like dust on the wind, and the small wooden charm stayed on Ethan's workbench, untouched but never forgotten. He had kept working as a mechanic, fixing ships, mining rigs, and broken colony machines. The workshop grew older, rust climbing the walls, but the charm remained clean, the edges worn smooth from his fingers turning it over on restless nights. The colony changed. New traders came, old shops closed, and the streets grew busier with travelers from distant systems. Ethan grew quieter with each year, speaking less to neighbors and spending more time in the workshop. No one asked about the girls anymore. No one remembered them. One evening, as he was repairing a power coupler, a low hum trembled through the air. It wasn't the sound of a small shuttle or a mining craft. It was deeper, heavier, like a living thing breathing above the colony. Tools stilled in his hands as the hum grew louder, rattling the metal walls. Outside, shadows stretched unnaturally long, and the street lamps flickered. People looked up, shielding their eyes. A massive shape descended through the cloud layer, a ship so large it blocked the light from the twin moons. Its surface was smooth and silver black, lined with faint glowing marks that shifted like running water. The ship didn't land in the main port. It came straight toward the outskirts, toward his workshop. Dust exploded upward as its landing thrusters roared. The ground shook, sending tools tumbling from shelves. Ethan stepped outside, heart pounding. The ship's lower hatch slid open with a hiss, releasing a warm rush of perfumed air. Figures emerged, tall, armored guards in silver-plated suits, weapons at their sides. Their movements were precise, disciplined. Between them walked two women. The first moved with a steady, commanding stride, her long white hair tied back, her deep blue skin marked with silver lines across her jaw. Her eyes scanned the surroundings with the focus of someone who expected danger at every step. The second woman was younger, softer-faced, with the same pale blue skin and the same sharp eyes Ethan remembered from so long ago. For a moment, his mind refused to match them with the two small, shivering girls from that cold night. But the way the younger one looked at him, direct, unblinking, pulled the years away in an instant. She stopped at the edge of the landing ramp and spoke his name. Her voice carried across the dusty yard, steady but heavy with something unspoken. He didn't answer at first. Too many questions filled the space between them. The younger woman stepped forward, and the guards immediately moved to shield her, but she raised a hand, and they stopped. She walked up to him until only a meter separated them. Up close, he saw the faint scar near her ear where the silver mark used to be. "You gave us food," she said, her voice softer now, "and warmth, when no one else would." Ethan's grip tightened around the wrench in his hand, though he didn't know why. "That was a long time ago." "We did not forget," she said. Her gaze shifted briefly to the charm in his breast pocket. "Neither did you." The older woman stepped forward. "My sister speaks for the Star Throne," she said, her voice carrying the authority of command. "You are owed a life debt. We are here to honor it." He glanced at the massive ship behind them, at the silent guards, at the strange looks from the few colony workers watching from a distance. "You flew here. For me?" "Yes," the younger one replied simply, "because we need you now." Ethan almost laughed. "I'm a mechanic." "You're more than that," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And there is something only you can do." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of metal and smoke from the ship. The older sister glanced around, then back at him. "Will you come aboard? We have little time to explain here." He hesitated, looking once at his workshop, at the scattered tools, at the worn couch where they had once slept. Then his gaze returned to them. The girls who had vanished into the night a decade ago now returned in armor and power. Finally, he nodded. "All right, but I'm bringing my coat." A faint smile touched the younger sister's lips, there and gone in a heartbeat. The guards stepped aside, and the ramp extended fully. As Ethan followed them up into the belly of the ship, the hum of its engines surrounded him. The air was warmer here, filled with a strange, sweet scent. The walls glowed faintly, and the floor beneath his boots vibrated with restrained energy. He didn't know where they were taking him. He didn't know what waited beyond the next door. But the way the sisters walked ahead, calm, purposeful, told him one thing. Whatever it was, it would change everything. The door to the inner chamber slid open without a sound, revealing a space unlike anything Ethan had seen before. The walls shimmered faintly as if made from liquid metal, shifting with subtle patterns that reminded him of deep ocean currents. A long table stood at the center, not made for eating but for command. A map of stars hovered above it, rotating slowly in a blue glow. The older sister moved to the far side of the table, her armor catching the light. "We are not here by chance," she said. "Your name, Ethan Cole, is known to the Star Throne, the night you helped us change the course of our lives." He kept his eyes on the map, tracing unfamiliar constellations. "And now you've come to repay me?" The younger sister stepped closer, her gaze locked on his. "Not just repay, we need you. There is a threat to the throne, an enemy hiding where only a human can go." Ethan frowned. "Why only a human?" The older sister tapped the glowing map, zooming in on a distant barren system. "This is a restricted zone. It holds the ruins of an old human war relic, machines and weapons your kind left behind before retreating from this region. Alien ships trigger the defenses instantly." "But a human can walk right in," Ethan finished. Lyra, he could still remember her name now, nodded. "You still carry the blood code of the Terran war forces. The machines will recognize you as an ally." He leaned back slightly, the weight of her words settling in. "You're asking me to walk into a fortress built for war after 10 years of silence." Sammy's eyes softened. "We never forgot you. But until now, we could not risk contact. The enemy would have found you." A sudden memory flashed. The broken door of his workshop, the empty blankets, the charm left behind. "That night, Did you leave to protect me? Lyra didn't answer right away, but the small tightening in her jaw was enough. Yes, she said finally. The older sister leaned forward. If you refuse, the throne will fall to them. Our people will be enslaved again, and you, she paused, her eyes sharp, you will never know the truth about the pact your father made with ours. The name hit him like a sudden drop in gravity. My father? He was more than a minor, Lyra said quietly. He saved our parents before we were born. That is why the throne owes your bloodline. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. Ethan looked between them. You could have told me years ago. We could not, Sammy said, her voice almost a whisper. The hunters were always watching. Silence settled for a moment, broken only by the low hum of the ship. Outside the window, the colony lights looked tiny, fragile. Finally, Ethan let out a long breath. If I do this, I'm doing it my way. No royal guards breathing down my neck. The older sister's lips curved in the faintest smile. Agreed, but you will not go alone. One of us will guide you. Lyra stepped forward without hesitation. I'll go. Sammy gave her a look, half worry, half acceptance. Then I'll prepare the ship. The decision seemed final. The map dissolved into the table as they turned toward the exit. As Ethan followed Lyra down the corridor, he noticed how different she moved now. Her steps steady, her shoulders straight and neat, nothing like the shivering girl from years ago. But every so often, her hand would brush the small pouch at her belt, the same way she once clutched the wooden charm. They reached the armory. Racks of weapons lined the walls, some sleek and polished, others old and battle-worn. Lyra handed him a compact pulse rifle and a thin-bladed combat knife. These are for defense. The machines won't harm you, but the enemy might. He tested the weight of the rifle, then slung it over his shoulder. Feels like old times. You've fought before, once or twice. His voice was quiet, but the edge in it made her glance at him longer than usual. They returned to the main deck. The ship's engines shifted tone, preparing for departure. Guards moved with purpose, checking systems, sealing compartments. Through the wide viewing panel, Ethan watched the colony grow smaller. The dusty streets, the crooked roofs, the lonely workshop, all fading into the darkness of space. He thought of the years spent there, of the night that had started it all, of the questions that had never left him. And now, those questions had led him here, to a royal warship heading toward a place where no alien could survive. Lyra stood beside him, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Whatever happens on that planet, she said, you will not face it alone. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the pull of something he hadn't let himself feel. Purpose. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that once they landed, there would be no turning back. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder, revealing a dead star system. A dim sun hung far in the distance, giving only a weak light to the gray planet below. Its surface was scarred with black lines, like the cracks of a shattered mirror. Even from orbit, the ruins of colossal machines were visible, silent, and lifeless for centuries. Ethan stood at the viewport, his reflection faint against the vast emptiness outside. Lyra joined him, her voice steady. That is where the old human war relic lies. Inside, the enemy hides and gathers power. The defenses will kill anything alien before it gets close. He studied the planet for a moment. And you're sure the machines will let me in? They will, she said, but they may not let you out if the enemy takes control. The drop shuttle was prepared in silence. Lyra insisted on going with him despite the danger. She carried a smaller weapon, built for speed rather than brute force, and wore armor light enough for quick movement. Ethan kept his old coat over the armored vest they gave him, refusing to leave behind the one thing that felt like home. As they descended through the thin atmosphere, lightning crackled across the sky. The ruins stretched endlessly, jagged shapes of metal and stone half buried in dust. The shuttle set down in what had once been a landing yard, now cracked and overgrown with twisted metal vines. The air outside was thin, cold, and sharp. Ethan's boots crunched over debris as they moved toward a massive gateway ahead. Two giant machines stood on either side, their towering forms motionless but not lifeless. Their sensor eyes glowed faint red as they scanned him. A deep, metallic voice boomed. Terran genetic code detected. Access granted. The gates groaned open, revealing a dark corridor lined with cables as thick as trees. Lyra stayed close, her head turning constantly. This place feels alive, she murmured. It probably is, Ethan replied. These war machines were built to think for themselves. They advanced deeper into the ruins. Holograms flickered faintly on the walls, ghostly images of old human soldiers, their faces unreadable, their voices lost to time. The floor vibrated beneath their feet, as if something far below was waking up. Halfway through the corridor, movement flickered ahead. Figures stepped from the shadows, tall, insect-like aliens armed with jagged rifles. Their armor was black and uneven, as if scavenged from battles. Lyra's weapon came up instantly. "Hunters," she hissed. The first shot rang out, striking the wall near Ethan's head. He dove behind a piece of fallen machinery while Lyra returned fire, her shots quick and precise. The corridor echoed with the sound of pulse rounds. Ethan slid to a better position and fired, hitting one of the hunters square in the chest. The alien collapsed with a screech, its rifle clattering to the ground. More emerged from hidden doors surrounding them. "They must have hacked part of the defense system," Ethan shouted over the noise. "Then we keep moving," Lyra said, dropping another with a clean shot. They fought their way forward, step by step, until they reached a large chamber. In its center stood a towering machine shaped like a human soldier, its metal frame plated in ancient armor. At its feet lay the enemy's control station, glowing with symbols in both alien and human script. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "That's not just a base, that's a command node. If we take it, the whole planet's defenses will follow our orders." Lyra gave a quick nod. "Then do it." He moved fast, vaulting over a low barrier and sliding toward the console. His fingers flew across the controls, bypassing layers of security codes left by human engineers long dead. The machine above them stirred, its head turning, red eyes locking onto the hunters flooding into the room. With a deep mechanical roar, it moved, its massive arms sweeping through the attackers like they were paper. The hunters screamed, their weapons useless against the ancient war construct. Lyra covered him while he worked, her shots picking off anyone who got too close. Sweat dripped down Ethan's temple as the final command line unlocked. "Done," he said, slamming the execute key. The machine straightened, its voice booming through the chamber. New command authority recognized, Ethan Cole. The remaining hunters broke and fled into the shadows, the sound of their retreat echoing through the metal halls. Lyra lowered her weapon, breathing hard. "You've just taken control of a planet's worth of war machines," she said. Ethan looked up at the massive construct. "Let's hope I only need them for one thing." Outside, the gates began to close again, sealing the fortress. Above, hidden turrets turned toward the sky, ready to fire. The enemy might have escaped for now, but they would never set foot on this world again without facing the full power of human-built wrath. As they made their way back to the shuttle, Lyra glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Now you know why only you could do this." Ethan didn't answer. His mind was already on the next question: why his father's name was tied to this place, and what debt still remained between their families. The shuttle cut through the thin clouds, leaving the gray planet behind, but the weight of what had happened there stayed heavy in Ethan's mind. Lyra sat across from him, helmet on her lap, watching him with the same steady eyes she'd had since the night they met. The war machine's final words echoed in his head, the way it had spoken his name as if it had known him for years. When they docked with the main ship, the older sister, Sammy, was waiting. She scanned them quickly, her gaze stopping on the faint scorch mark across Ethan's coat. "You found the command node?" Ethan nodded. "And I took it. Every defense on that planet now answers to me." Sami's lips tightened. "Good. We'll need them." She gestured for them to follow. They walked through the corridors until they reached a smaller chamber, sealed with heavy doors. Inside, the lights were dim, the air cooler. In the center stood a tall cylinder of glass, inside which floated a data core glowing faint blue. "This," Sami said, "is why we came for you. The hunters are only part of the problem. They're working for someone with access to knowledge that should have died with the last human war." Ethan stepped closer to the glass, studying the core. "This is human tech." "It's more than that," Lyra said quietly. "It holds a pact, an agreement made between our family and yours long before we were born. We didn't understand it until recently." Sami touched a control panel, and the glow inside the core shifted. Holograms bloomed into the air, two figures standing side by side. One was clearly an alien queen, tall and regal. The other was a human in military armor, helmet under his arm. Ethan's breath caught. "That's my father." The recording spoke in a crackling voice. "If either of our lines is ever threatened, the other will answer the call. Blood for blood, life for life." The image faded, and silence settled in the room. Lyra stepped closer to him. "When you helped us 10 years ago, we thought you were just a kind stranger. But when the charm you kept matched the crest in our archives, we knew." Ethan took the wooden star from his pocket, holding it between his fingers. "So, all this mission wasn't just because I fed you. It was because my father made a promise." "Yes," Sammy said, "but it's more than duty. We would have come for you even without the pact." Before Ethan could reply, the ship's alarms cut through the room. A crew member's voice came over the comms. "Urgent. Enemy fleet incoming. Multiple Hunter-class warships." Sami's hand went to her weapon. "They followed us." The ship jolted as the first blast hit. Lyra grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him toward the exit. "The defenses you control, they can turn this fight." They ran to the command deck. Outside the viewing panel, the black shapes of hunter ships moved like predatory insects, circling, firing in bursts. The sisters' crew worked quickly, calling out shield levels and weapons status. Ethan stepped to the console and linked into the Fortress planet's command systems. A map appeared, red dots for the hunters, blue for the war machines. His fingers flew across the interface, sending orders down to the surface. Far below, massive turrets rose from the planet's crust. The ancient machines powered up with a deep, thunderous hum. The first barrage tore through 2 hunter ships instantly, scattering the rest. Cheers erupted on the deck, but Sami didn't relax. They won't retreat. They'll regroup. The second wave came fast, but now the planet fought with them. Laser fire crossed the black void, shredding enemy formations. The hunters tried to flank, but Ethan directed ground-based missile towers to cut off their escape routes. Minutes later, the last hunter ship exploded into fragments, burning away in the thin atmosphere. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the engines. Ethan leaned back from the console, his chest rising and falling slowly. Lyra's hand rested briefly on his shoulder. "You've done more for our people than you know." Sammy's gaze softened. "You've fulfilled the pact your father made, but the war is not over." Ethan looked at both sisters. "Then, I'm not leaving until it is." The older sister gave a rare smile. "Then welcome to the Star Throne's fight." Beyond the glass, the fortress planet turned slowly, its massive guns now silent but ready. For the first time, Ethan felt like his father's shadow wasn't something he had to live under. It was something he could stand beside. The throne hall of the royal flagship was vast, its walls lined with banners of silver and deep blue. Rows of armored guards stood silent as Ethan walked between them, the sound of his boots echoing on the polished floor. At the far end, a raised platform held 2 high-backed seats. Lyra and Sami stood there, their armor replaced by regal robes, their expressions calm but watchful. The war against the hunters had dragged on for weeks after the fortress planet's victory. Each battle pushed the enemy further back, but they had not been fully destroyed. Now, the final assault was ready, a strike deep into the heart of the hunters' command. Sami's voice carried across the hall. "The fleet is assembled. Our spies confirm the enemy leader will be present. If we cut off the head, the rest will scatter." Ethan approached the platform, meeting her gaze. "And you're sure this is the last fight?" "It is the one that will decide everything," Lyra said. The plan was simple in words, but dangerous in truth. Ethan would lead a small strike team into the enemy flagship while the rest of the fleet kept their ships busy. With the war machines from the fortress planet under his command, they could breach even the strongest defenses. In the war room, the maps lit up again. Red and blue markers shifted as captains reported their readiness. Lyra handed Ethan a wrist device linked to the fortress command network. "With this, you can call any machine to your location. Use it wisely." The fleet launched into the darkness of space, engines burning bright against the void. Hunter ships appeared on the scanners, their formation tight around a massive vessel at the center. The enemy flagship was black as night, covered in sharp, blade-like structures that glowed faintly with energy. The battle began with a sudden flare of weapons fire. Star Throne ships clashed with the hunters in brutal, close-range combat. Ethan's shuttle broke through under the cover of the chaos, racing toward the flagship's docking bay. They landed hard. The air inside was heavy, metallic, and filled with the low growl of the flagship's engines. Shadows moved in the upper walkways, hunters ready to defend their leader. Ethan moved fast, pulse rifle in hand, Lyra and 3 guards at his side. The halls were narrow and dark, lit only by the flicker of emergency lights. The hunters attacked in waves, their jagged weapons sparking against armor. Every few minutes, Ethan tapped the wrist device, calling in support. Mechanical soldiers from the fortress planet crashed through walls and ceilings, tearing into the enemy lines with unstoppable force. Finally, they reached the central chamber. A towering hunter with armor of blackened gold stood at the far end, a massive energy blade in his hands. His voice was deep and cold. "So the human comes at last." Ethan didn't answer. He fired, forcing the leader to move, then advanced with his team. The fight was vicious, the leader's blade cutting through metal and stone alike. Lyra's shots drove him back, but his strength was monstrous. A final order through the wrist device brought the largest war construct into the chamber. The giant machine's hand closed around the hunter leader, lifting him from the floor. With a single crushing motion, it ended the fight. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the fortress machine's systems. The war was over. They returned to the flagship, greeted by cheers from the crew. Sami met them at the docking bay, her expression breaking into the smallest smile. "It is done," she said. The celebration in the throne hall lasted through the night, but Ethan stayed near the edges, watching the people he had fought beside. Lyra found him there, holding 2 cups of warm, spiced drink. She offered one. "You could have left long ago, but you stayed. Why?" He looked at the cup, then at her. "Because 10 years ago, 2 girls needed me, and now I think I needed them." The words made her smile, though her eyes softened with something more. "Then you will always have a place here." Before the fleet departed, Lyra pressed something into his hand, the wooden charm now fitted with a thin chain of silver. "So you never forget," she said. Ethan closed his fingers around it, like feeling the smooth wood warm against his palm. He watched as the royal fleet spread across the stars, the hunters gone, the throne secure. For the first time in years, the path ahead felt open. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was not the end of his story. It was only the end of the first chapter.